guys, welcome back to the channel. Most of you guys already know that I have a few world titles, minus the one that Bob apparently stole from me. But I have a few world titles under my belt, and one of the things that I really want to talk with you guys about, because I get so many messages, questions, asking how do you reach the pinnacle of kickboxing? It could be amateur or it could be professional, but people want to know what steps they need to take, what are going to be the difficulties in achieving that world title. So today we're going to go through all of it, and it will include mostly my personal experiences and how I managed to climb to the top and what I would recommend for all of you guys. So we'll roll the intro and we'll dive in to this episode. Alright guys, this is going to take a little while, so bear with me. I want to get through many points. And first of all, we're going to run through all the little stages, all the steps that you should be taking to achieve your dream of winning a world title. And then after I've talked about that, I want to go through and mention, put a highlight on the things that were the most difficult in my career, what really almost held me back, the things that I would advise you guys to start taking steps towards now to make sure you don't have the same stumble, the same roadblocks that I had to face. All right guys, first off, we are talking about the most important thing, the building block for all of this, and that is developing your skill set. You need to get into the gym and start getting those techniques down and an understanding for the sport, so that when time comes where you start competition, you start moving up the ranks or whatever it is, you're going to have everything you need in your back pocket to pull it out, to bang off those awesome attacks, to pull off that defense, to have the awesome cardio. Everything you need needs to start right now at the gym. Now, of course, that seems fairly self-explanatory, but there's no point in moving to the other steps if we don't acknowledge that first. Just get in there, start learning, start becoming a better athlete. And I would personally advise a solid 1 to 2 years of learning and getting very, very good before you start trying to chase those fights. Just go in and learn. Imagine if I told you guys today, okay, here's an instrument, or you're gonna bust it on the piano. You're gonna take 3 months on the piano, 6 months, and then you're gonna go and you're gonna perform in front of a whole bunch of people. I'd probably say, if somebody told me that, I'd be like, no. 3 to 6 months, that's not enough. Starting from scratch, I need a solid year minimum. Well, same thing goes for fighting. Don't rush it. Don't try and skip steps. You want to really take your time, because guess what? You're learning an instrument, you're performing, you mess up, you go home. You mess up in fighting, you get knocked out, you go to the hospital. So it's very important that you take your time, take that 1 to 2 years to really develop your skills before you worry about competition. Now, what we also need to talk about is finding somebody who's going to develop your skills properly. And that means we need to go and do some research. We need to find a good gym and a good trainer. Now, those are both very important, because you can have one or the other, but that's not enough. You need both of them. If you have a great trainer, but you don't have great training partners, that's not enough. You can have great training partners, but without somebody watching you, helping your skills develop in this beginner intermediate time in the first 1 to 2 years, when you're trying to develop all those skills and really get down what you need to do, well, without one of those, you're going to be struggling. So make sure you do your research. A safe way to find if your gym is good and if your training partners are good, or just look at what the trainer has accomplished. Does he have his own world titles? Has he had some fights? Does he have good credentials? And then after that, look at the training partners, the top guys in the gym, and see if they've done something. If you have a gym with pretty much no fighters who have accomplished anything, that's not a good sign. And keep in mind, if you have the aspirations of catching one of those massive world titles, the big ones, not just some sort of rinky-dink one that nobody would hear of, like WKX20. What's that world title? Well, you've never heard of it because it's really nothing. If you want to go after the big titles, then find a gym where people have won real titles, major organizations, major promotions. If you have those guys, they're legit. Everybody else, I'd be a little bit wary. Now, once you've spent the first 1 to 2 years at a good gym with good training partners developing your skills, it's time to start competing, time to start that amateur career. And a lot of people probably think oh, way up high when you reach the pinnacle of fight sports, that's got to be the scariest, that's got to be the worst. But the worst for me, and possibly for many others, was that first amateur fight. Second amateur fight, third amateur fight. Those first few were just awful for me. You might think that winning this was a lot scarier and a lot harder. It was a lot harder. Yes, maybe the fight was harder, but the nerves were much, much worse for those first fights. Even though I was fighting the best guys in the world, I knew I was one of the best in the world. Whereas when I was starting off, I didn't know how good I was, and I went in very scared. So the key to starting the amateur competition and starting to get fights, it's all about experience. That's what you need, because when you get past your first 10 fights, at least for me, that's when I found when things started clicking. I was able to pull off more impressive things in the fight. My mind opened up and I was able to become a little bit more like I am in the gym. If I can perform up here in the gym, on my first amateur fight, I was down here. By about my 10th, I was performing more like up here. And now as a professional, I'm probably performing around here. A little bit better, but I haven't jumped so much in skill level and what I'm able to do in the ring, but it was that first 10 fights where the experience made so much difference. Once you've done something 10 times, and you've had that experience of repeating and repeating and repeating, you start to get a little more comfortable, and the best versions of you start to really shine. Now keep in mind, in your amateur career, you can go for some very, very big titles. And you don't necessarily need to have somebody in your town holding events where you are always waiting for fights. You're like, oh shoot, I'm supposed to fight in 3 months. The promoter said maybe he'll have something for me. Don't worry about that. Sometimes you just need to, reach into your pocket, pull out the checkbook, and you need to get out there and just fly to where the big competitions are. They have like Buakaw, IFMA. All those are very big competitions, amateur ones, where you can go and you can compete and you'll get lots of experience, lots of fights, and you're guaranteed matches. As opposed to early in my amateur career where a lot of times people would take fights against me and then maybe they'd hear something through the grapevine. Like there wasn't video footage back then, but they'd hear like, oh, Gabriel Varga, okay, he's 7-0, he's pretty good. And I just had people pulling out all the time, which is really frustrating when you're just trying to build up your record. All I really wanted was 10-0. I was like, once I get 10-0, I'm going to end up flipping to professional. That was my goal. I ended up actually going further. I went to 15-0 in my amateur career, but really it was all about experience, all about that volume. So if you're wanting to get that volume, go to those tournaments where you're competing multiple times in a weekend. Yes, sometimes you have to wear the gear. I never liked the idea of putting gear on. I did all my amateur career with just gloves. No shin pads, no headgear, but that helped prepare me a little bit more for the professional stage, but still at the same time going and getting, 3, 4, 5 fights in a few days, that's gonna help you so much more. So if you're in the earlier part of your career and you're going, I just want volume, I want to fight every month, head off to these things. There will be fights there for you. There will be people to compete against, as opposed to waiting for your local promotion to, occasionally get you a fight. Slow going that way sometimes, so just get that experience. Now at this point, what you should really be trying to do is refine your skill set. Because when you first start off, a good teacher hopefully will teach you everything. They'll teach you all sorts of things, but as you get further and further on, a good teacher and yourself should start recognizing like, ooh, I'm really good at this left uppercut. We need to really start working, slipping to the side and countering with it, or setting it up and coming up the middle with it. And you start really developing your skills and really honing in on how you're going to be the best fighter possible. And sometimes that means removing certain techniques from your arsenal. For the most part, you can bust them out sometimes, or getting really good at little holes that you have. Maybe you have little gaps where you get caught a lot and you start going, okay, I have to really work on making sure this isn't a big gaping hole when I reach a higher level. So you refine your skill set at this point. Obviously, you're always trying to improve, but really, really dialing in, putting your skills under a microscope with your coach. It's a great time to do that before you move on to the next level. Now, something else you can really focus on if you're wanting to go up to the top level and get signed by the big promotions eventually is start developing your social media presence. I know that sounds so off topic, but it's a reality of the fight world now. It's unfortunate. It's something I did not do. I had people pushing me all the time. They're like, Gabe, what if you get in K1? What if you get in Glory? You have to make sure you have this following. And I went, I don't care. I just want to fight. I just want to train. That's all I'm interested in. And then I got to the point where, yes, I was fortunate enough to get signed by these big promotions. We'll talk about how that happened. But what really was pointed out to me that I was lacking was that following, that 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 people from the different platforms that are going to be watching, that are going to make sure that they're there to view. And the promotions want to see that. They want to see that you're going to draw in a crowd, because that's what it's all about for them. It's about those eyes on the TV screen when their promotion is running their events live. So if I had to go back now and I could tell myself something, I would say, you know what? Even if it's 100 people, you start with 100 people, they're all your buddies. And then bit by bit, you put out a little bit more content. Maybe it's just you hitting the pads on Instagram or something like that. You get 5 or 6 more people who follow and are interested in your career. Or you jump on and you hold up the IG Live and you talk to the screen. You say, whoa, I have this fight coming up, guys, tune in. And you just give people little updates, little glimpses of what your career is like in the amateur stages. And down the road, it will really help you, not only with signing with promotions, but also having some negotiation power. If you're somebody who puts the time in on the social media and you go to these big promotions with 100,000 followers, you can actually sometimes increase the amount you're asking for. All right, it's all about that. At the end of the day, I didn't think this initially. I was always about the belts. That's all I cared about. Get me my belts. But now that I'm further in my career, I go, you know what? The money's important. I'm very, very happy with the belts. Don't get me wrong, but now the money is also very important. I want to make sure that when I retire, I'm not having a bank account that says 0. So you have to make sure that that social media comes as well. So when you reach out to the promotions, they go, oh, okay, this guy, look at that. He has a nice following. Let's get him under our banner. Now let's move on and talk about what you can be doing during your amateur career and your early professional career to make sure you actually have fights when you transition to professional. Because if you're amateur, and let's say you've been traveling around, you've been going to those tournaments, or you have a local promoter who's making sure you get lots of fights. You're very, very lucky if you have that. I didn't always have that, but if you have that, that's great. Somebody who's going to put the time in, who's going to put the money in to fly in people and make sure you're getting that competition experience. So if you have all that, then what you should be doing is just bit by bit reaching out and building connections with the promotions that you want to sign with when you're professional. Now, obviously, if you're still amateur, you don't want to be reaching out to Glory or 1FC or UFC. They're not even going to look at you. They're going to think you're ridiculous. But you can start reaching out to the other promotions which are smaller than those massive scale worldwide promotions. For example, they end up looking maybe something like, let's say, 1FC. Maybe they look and see the Lion Fight Promotions. They're like, okay, Lion Fight Promotions. They're in the States. They have some good fighters. Let's check and see who these guys have as champions. And maybe we'll sign one of those guys. So what you do is you start talking to Lion Fight, or you start talking to another promotion somewhat in your area. For me, what I did at the very end of my amateur career was I started looking at the promotions scattered throughout the States. I went, okay, these guys in the States, the guys that I want to fight are competing out in New York. New York was kind of a hub for kickboxing, Muay Thai, so I started reaching out to those promoters saying, you know what, when I make that turn to professional, I want to come and compete for you guys. You're somebody I'm interested in. And I just had their ear. I had their interest. I'm 13-0. Okay, now I'm 14-0. Now I'm 15-0. And I really want to come and compete for you guys. And sometimes you have to put yourself out there. You just say, you know what, I'll fly myself out. Or don't worry about the pay. I don't care about the $500 purse that you're going to pay me, because remember, it's nothing when you make that initial turn to pro, but you're constantly in these guys' ears. And then when you start climbing the ranks through the professional, then you start reaching out to those big promotions. I started letting K1 and Glory and all those other ones know that I was around after I kind of got to 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, thinking that when I got to, 8, 9, 10 fights, then they might be interested in me. And reaching out to them and letting them know beforehand, I think was very, very valuable. Now we can establish connections other ways as well. It does not just need to be me calling them. Also good is other people mentioning to them that Gabriel Varga might have some skills and might have some potential. So once I actually got signed with K1 and Glory, then I started hearing from those guys actually in the organization that a lot of people had vouched for me. So you want to establish good relations with everybody in the fight industry. It could be local coaches, could be the head of the sanctioning bodies, it could be the guys in the commission. Just, establish relations with people. Go up, shake hands, tell them how much you appreciate all the hard work they do. And people really like that, and people will remember it. And if you have the skill set that's high enough, people will actually go out on the limb and recommend your name to these big promotions. That's one of the reasons I got signed. It made such a big difference in my career. And I very much appreciate everybody who took the time to mention my name to these big promotions, because it's probably one of the massive reasons that we ended up getting signed. Of course, my father and myself were both constantly emailing and phone calling K1, and that's what ended up getting us that big opportunity in K1. But all those other guys helped as well. I'm sure of it, and it's just something that you can be doing for your career. Now, something else to keep in mind if you want to compete at the highest level is you basically need to train harder than like 99% of all the other people in martial arts. Keep that in mind. It's not gonna be, oh, I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna work like 50, 60%. There's gonna be some other guys in the corner who have an amateur fight coming up, they're training a little harder than me. No, you need to go in with the mindset that you are going to outwork everybody. You're gonna train harder than everybody. You're gonna put more passion into this sport than everybody else you know. You have that mindset, you have that mentality, you really believe you can do it, then I say yes, 100%, go for it. If you're hesitant on that, you're like, I'm kind of lazy, I don't really like the hard work, but I do want to be a world champion. Well, those two don't mix very well, and it's probably not going to turn out well for you. That's just my opinion. Now, guys, I sort of took you through the little steps there, my career, what I really worked towards, how it all played out for me, what you guys can do. But let's talk about the hurdles, the biggest hurdles in my career. Because I was fortunate, I had a few things that really helped me out. As I was going through my amateur career, I had a local promotion that was making sure that I was getting fights fairly consistently. As I said, fights were falling through, and I missed out on some good opportunities. I missed out on, having 5 or 6 fights a year, and sometimes it was only 2 or 3 because people knew who I was bit by bit, started getting a little bit worried. And then as I got further on and we had to fly people in to compete against me because nobody local or within Canada would do that anymore, then I was fortunate enough that my father actually started a promotion just to make sure I could get fights. We actually had, I believe, 5 or 6 fights. I got my first amateur world title on that promotion. I defended multiple times, got my second amateur world title, and then ended up getting my first pro world title, WKN title against an opponent from France. I ended up getting that opportunity based on those guys. But the big hurdle was still getting to that big promotion. There was a lot of time wasted in my career waiting around for the call from K1, from Glory. I believe I had almost an 11-month gap between fights where nothing was happening. So if you can plan things out, if you can do the things I mentioned, make sure that you're not just sitting there waiting for that call. You can make sure that does not happen to you with the big social media presence, having the relations, building those connections beforehand, and then having that awesome skill set. If you can get those 3 down, hopefully you can avoid that massive hurdle, which I had, which is just waiting around, hoping at some point you get the opportunity. That is heart crushing. And I'm glad I had the passion and desire not to give up, because I know a lot of people after 11 months of no fights, constantly waiting for people to reach out to me and give me an opportunity, a lot of people would have just been like, oh, okay, you know what, it's not going to happen, I'm done. So you really need to have that burning desire where, you have other things on the go. Maybe you're in school, maybe you have work, you have those things on the go, but you're still constantly working, training, and waiting for your opportunity to step closer and closer to your dream of becoming a world champion. Anyway, guys, that is my breakdown of how I won a world title and steps you can take to get yourself that much closer to your dream, to accomplishing that massive goal of becoming a kickboxing, MMA, boxing, Muay Thai, doesn't really matter, world champion. Any of those are amazing, especially if you're talking about any of the big promotions. You get a title with ONE FC, with Glory, with Bellator, with Lion Fight, with UFC, obviously. Any of those things, you're doing amazing. It's a fantastic feeling to hold those belts, to know that you had a dream and you managed to make it happen. So I would say if any of you guys have that dream, go for it. 100%. Take the tips I gave you today. Really, really work towards establishing yourself as somebody who is known by the public, or at least within your community, somebody who has an amazing skill set and somebody who the promotions know, the big promotions know exist, so that when the time comes, when it's appropriate, they will sign you. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like. If you haven't already, join the channel and get subscribed for lots of content, tutorials, breakdowns of fights, so much information, so much striking related content. And as always, guys, train hard. I'll see you back here soon for another video.